Here.
Councilmember Tremblay. Here. Vice Mayor Molche.
Present.
Mayor Craven.
Here. At this time, we have a closed session scheduled. I'll ask the city attorney to read the circumstances under which we can go into closed session.
Testing, that's better. Try it again. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. It's the initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4. Number of potential cases is 1.
Okay, we'll now recess into closed session, and we'll be back at 5 o'clock for regular business.
All right, we'll call this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District, regular meeting of the Board of Directors for July 14, 2021 to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Director Craven,
Here.
Director Kildee,
Here.
Director Mulchay,
Present.
Secretary Santangelo,
Here.
Chair Tremblay.
Here. Mr. Kildee, would you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Any amendments to the agenda this evening?
No amendments.
All right, hearing none. Are there any public comments, Jeffrey?
No public comments.
Okay, we're on a roll. We're at consent calendar.
I'll move the approval of consent calendar as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the consent calendar. Please vote. And that's adopted on a unanimous 5-0 vote. Any comments from staff?
No comments.
All right, any comments from board members? Mrs. Craven?
Would like to encourage all, I will not ask who's going, because I know you don't want the world to know that your house is empty maybe for a while, but I would encourage everybody to attend the CASA meeting, California Association of Sanitation Agencies, October was 11 through 13.
August.
October, next month, and so you need to get your reservation in if you plan to go.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pierik?
Yes, I noticed that a member of the public held up a blue card a moment ago and looked like he may, I don't know if he's got a comment for the
Oh,
CSD
is
or...
this a comment for the Camarillo Sanitary District?
He held it up when you asked, so I don't know.
Sorry about that, I didn't see you. All right. Apparently it's for City Council. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, we'll hold on that then for the time being. Thank you, Mr. Pierik. Any other comments from board members? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the Sanitary District.
I will call the meeting of the Camarillo City Council to order, ask the record to reflect that all council members are present, and ask if there are any amendments to this agenda.
No amendments.
Well, the first order of business is a very nice one, a retirement plaque for senior equipment mechanic Dave Howells. Dave, would you please join me over there? He can't guarantee it's working, but I think it's working. I'm doing fine. How are you doing? I don't have a script, so I'm just going to talk tonight. Dave has been an exemplary employee. When Dave started in 1988, the city, he's a senior equipment mechanic. I'm sure he wasn't senior when he started. We had a small fleet, but we didn't have any money at all to keep our fleet up. We didn't have any money at all to buy new equipment because we didn't have any money at all. Not even radios in the truck. So the mechanics, Dave started, he was initiated by fire, and the mechanics kept our equipment going for a long time, some of them. And they still do. We have equipment that our rolling stock can go many years past the anticipated expiration date, and it's thanks to you guys. So you've done a good job. We appreciate everything you've done. Thank you for all of the years you have given us from October 1988 to July 2021. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Now it's your turn. You're not going to talk. Okay.
Here. I'm humbled, and thank you.
And I think Jeffrey wants a picture. Yes, I'll ask council members for comments. Mr. Tremblay.
I really don't want Mr. Howells to go unscathed before I say a few things, and I meant unscathed in a very complimentary way. I know that Dave's service to the city has been exemplary, but I want to address you in another manner in which I know Dave, and that is through Boy Scouts. Dave, for years, has been a go-to scout leader in Troop 225. He was a go-to scout leader for my son. His son, Trevor, is an Eagle. Take over our son, Stephen. Their daughter, Olivia, would have been an Eagle had girls been able to be in Boy Scouts at that point. Dave is one of the finest people I have ever met, and one of the finest leaders I have ever met. The kids looked up to him, and the way that he demonstrated leadership and ethics and everything you want to instill in a young person, he's right there. And so I know that you gave exemplary service to the city, but you also have he's given exemplary service to our community and to our scouts, and I just wanted to say thanks.
Anybody else?
I'll say something, Your Honor.
Kevin.
Yeah, Dave, we've been, known you for quite a while here. It's amazing. Some 30 years goes by quickly, doesn't it? But I just want to thank you for your service. And as the mayor said, when you kind of broke in, obviously we didn't have a lot of money. And through the years, that's, changed. But you've always been really good to work with. And I really appreciate that, your professionalism and your dedication to the city. So I wish you nothing but success in the future. And I believe it's your wife with you. I'd like to thank you also for, allowing him to serve a beautiful community too and supporting us. I really appreciate that. It's team effort oftentimes. So again, Dave, thank you very much, and wish you nothing again, success in the future, whatever that may bring.
Tony?
And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned you, Denise. So anyway, because you're a team, and thank you again for everything.
And here is the wrapper for it. I neglected to give you. Thank you very much. Let's all give him a big hand. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
I'll move the approval of consent.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. Gets us down to discussion items. Item A, City Council Policy 1.04, scheduling City Council meeting agenda items. Could we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the City Council, good evening. In reviewing potential efficiencies and workforce productivity, staff requested that the Policy Committee review the recommended revisions before you. Staff's balance of workload and prioritization involve their duties under the department work plan, under the goals and objectives that have been set by the City Council, and through various regular duties as part of the operation. Since agenda items can expend considerable resources, City Council is requested to consider that when City Council member or a member of the public requests an item to be placed on the agenda, that it be done so by support of 2 additional council members, and that a request by the public be done so by a total of 3 council member support. So basically, the revisions to this policy then outline a 2-step process. And the process, in summary, would, a city council making a request at a city council meeting would require the support of at least 2 other city council members at a city council meeting. So if that request was agreed upon, then a brief introductory agenda report for this city council to consider would be brought at a following council meeting. And so the first step would be then that a council member would request an item be placed on a future agenda. That would require the support of 2 others. And then the second part of that would then be that the city council member who requested that item would work with the city manager and staff to bring a brief introductory agenda report on that item. So at this meeting then, it would provide an opportunity for the public to comment on this item. It would be a brief introductory report allowing the requesting city council member to provide some overview of the purpose of the request. And should the city council, then the majority of the city council support the item for further exploration, then the city manager then would schedule that item at a council meeting. Staff would then put in the work to provide the agenda report, would compile the information, the research, and then make the presentation to the city council at a future city council meeting. This policy does not conflict with policy 7.01 or the expectations of that. This would be for general plan amendments. So those are non-city initiated requests, and so that would still continue under the provisions of policy 7.01. So in essence, what the policy is requesting that instead of that one other council member supporting city council member request for an item placed on the agenda, it's the support of 2 others. And again, this is for the productivity and efficiency of staff time.
Are there any questions? Mr. Kildee.
So specifically, the change here is instead of getting the okay, let's say, from 1 council member, we're asking to get the okay from 2 council members.
That's correct. And the purpose of that is to ensure that the majority of the city council and that we're focusing our time on items that the majority of the city council would like to further explore. So rather than not having the support of an item and having invested considerable staff time to prepare an item, having the additional 2 council members, not just the 1, would show that there's a majority support to continue to hear that item.
Okay, so if that happens, I'm going to try to do a little bit of a scenario in my own mind here, and if I get a little wordy, let me know. If that should happen, that the individual that brings this up gets 2 other votes, it does get agendized for some sort of a future council meeting, not necessarily the next council meeting, but at some point within the calendar year. That's the first question I have. Is that correct?
Yes, so the first step would be a city council member requesting the item to be an item to be explored, and that would require 2 members of the city council to support that item. So then that would be placed on a future agenda, not necessarily the next meeting, but the next available meeting. At that meeting then, or in preparation of that meeting, the requesting city council member would work with the city manager and staff to provide a brief introduction into whatever that item may be, providing some level of background from the council. At times, we have city council members that make requests with very brief reasoning for their request. Well, this then next meeting, that would provide an opportunity for the city council to receive a brief overview of that request. So at that meeting, if the city council, the majority of the city council wants to explore that item further, then the staff would put in the work time, prepare and compile the information necessary to bring a full item to the city council for their consideration.
Okay, so let's say, again, that we get the 2 other council members, it gets agendized. Is there an opportunity, once it gets agendized, to make a determination that night, or could there either be another suggestion that this actually needs more research and perhaps going over to a subcommittee might be another option for us to further
do some due diligence on this, depending upon what that issue is.
Yes. So, yes, I think on the latter, let me try to provide an example. So tonight, Councilmember Kildee, if you requested an item to be on the agenda under this revised policy, you would need the support of 2 other council members in order for this item to be discussed at the next or a future council meeting. In 2 weeks, the city council meets again. You will have worked with me, and I would have worked with you to provide a brief introduction into what this agenda item is all about. You would present it to the city council. And at that meeting, then, the city council may refer the item to the committee or by majority, or the city council may say, yes, we want you staff to provide additional work. We want to explore this item further. And you would get, if you received majority support for this, then we'd bring it to a future council meeting with that full agenda report.
This is just my last follow-up. So with the Brown Act, obviously, we can talk to 1 other council member. We can't talk to 2. So whoever brings up an item like this, will they, at that meeting, have to try to convince a second council member to go along with this, or will that just be part of the discussion that we'll have on that night, whether or not we want to go forward with this or not? That's specifically the first meeting. We don't want to get into any discussion on this. We just want to get, read the tea leaves, if you will, if there's any interest in, furthering this with an agendized item.
That's correct. So the initial meeting would be just getting that initial interest and getting the support of 2 other council members to then bring it into the next meeting. And that's absolutely right. Since it's agendized, then you can have that discussion of whether the city council would like to further explore that without having invested the considerable time and effort, but at least have prepared a brief introductory report to the city council regarding the item and the reason why you brought it forth to the city council. So at that meeting, if you get majority support, then we do the full work on that. Staff would provide the full-on work necessary to bring a full item to the city council.
Just my point is, we really, that first meeting, I don't mean to monopolize the time, but that first meeting, we really can't get it into much of a discussion on that because it's not on the agenda. So that's why I
Right,
asked
and
that
that's
question.
absolutely one of the reasons why this item is being brought forth was brought to the committee and with a recommendation brought it here to the full city council, because when currently as council member requests are made, we're getting very little information on that. And staff is then directed to work on items that may or may not get support of the city council later. And so this 2-step process then would focus that the time and effort on staff's time and city council's time on items that the majority of the city council is interested in further exploring.
Thank you.
Mr. Moshe.
I don't see how this policy would apply, or nor does it make reference to situations where a council member at a city council meeting may bring up and suggest an item but refer it to committee. And then if I pull that string, what about ideas and/or items that are suggested that are born out of subcommittees? That happens very frequently. Actually, this policy in itself was born out of committee. So whether it was initiated by a council member or staff, I'm not sure. But what do we do in those situations? And I don't see how this policy applies to any of that.
With regard to referring to an item to the city,
To a city subcommittee.
Yes. For example, at the last meeting, we were working on norms, the city council, well, I mean, an initial, are you talking about it like an initial item? So for example, Councilmember Kildee tonight brings an item requesting further review of an item or so, and the city council by majority requests that the committee first review it. Is that your question?
Yeah, my question is, if Mr. Kildee has a concern about a traffic situation, maybe we want to paint some red curbs or something like that, well, then ideally, normally we would refer that to transportation subcommittee, And then we would discuss it more thoroughly there, make a recommendation from those two council members who sit on that respective committee to the whole committee. It can't ever be more than 3, because then we will have obviously broken the Brown Act. I mean, outside of this board here. But I'm getting to a bigger question too, but what would we do in that situation?
Yeah, so in that situation, the council by majority would request the item to be referred to the committee. So it's still taking those 3 council members, if it was all 5 of you were in attendance, but the majority of the council members would then refer the item to the committee. That would be the proper order of the item to be heard.
So in the second part of my question, what if, let's say, because I sit on the Street and Public Transportation Subcommittee, what if I have a concern with a traffic safety issue? I'm likely going to bring that up in subcommittee. It would be born there, I presume. We would discuss it at a subsequent Transportation Subcommittee there, then potentially take an action, make a recommendation to the City Council. That action only required 2, and it can only require 2. And not 3, because then otherwise we'd be in violation of the Brown Act. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, so absolutely, that does happen often. The committee members, you as a committee member have a role, and it's outlined, the expectations of that committee. So work is definitely comes to the committee by staff. Most frequently, it is part of the operation, or part of what we do daily is bring items to committee members to be heard first before a recommendation comes to the City Council. So that's where staff is initiating a committee item. A council member on the committee may also initiate an item because it's within your role. So already there is some expectation that the committee is working on certain things. It may be outlined as part of the goals and objectives, or even the operations. So those are expectations that we have as staff and the council has as the council, that you are already working on the committee. So absolutely, those are being initiated at the committee level to bring a recommendation, not a decision, but bring a recommendation to the full City Council.
How do I square those two things? So an idea born out of subcommittee by a council member will only require 2 and come to the City Council for a potential action upon recommendation of those 2 respective council members on that subcommittee. Or if it's born, if it originates and takes foot here at a council meeting, then it requires 3. So now there seems like an inconsistency that we're kind of just saying, oh, depending on where the idea originates, then we're going to treat that idea differently. Or, it will require a different threshold for it to progress.
If I can step in and help answer that. I think in that situation, if an idea is born in a committee by an individual council member, at some point before staff does an inordinate amount of work on it, it needs to come back to the entire council for a majority to give us direction to proceed on that issue. Not necessarily for a decision, but in order to proceed. And that's kind of, there's an ebb and flow to that. I mean, how much work, how much discussions on that. But at some point, I think we have to make sure that there's a majority of council that want to move forward on that idea or that issue, and then we can put more work into it, and then bring it back to the council for an ultimate decision, whether that's resolution, ordinance, that type of thing.
Are we in essence slowing down the process or creating more friction and less efficiency in the process? If we have subcommittees that meet as needed. We have some subcommittees that meet regularly monthly. We have some that meet every 2 months, or even I think maybe quarterly. So how do we square that? I'm going to have something will be born out of that. A suggestion will come out of subcommittee. Those 2 council members who sit on that respective subcommittee would in essence have to agree. But then it would then come to here that maybe the next subsequent council meeting, or maybe a future council meeting, for then an okay for them to go back to that subcommittee, so that way they can discuss it more thoroughly and then make a recommendation that'll come back to the council for an action. So now we've made what would originally have been maybe a simple process into a very more drawn out, complex, longer one. I feel like we're just compounding what is kind of
No.
a simple process.
Committees are not discussed in what was proposed tonight. That is not here at all. We're talking about something that I think is a good question, but it's not addressed in this policy that was given to us to discuss.
Yeah, and that was my original comment for asking the questions is, all right, so there are effectively, whether it's a workaround or a loophole or it's purposely, left out, whatever it may be. But I'm having difficulty squaring those two things.
Well, it never was part of this policy from committees.
Right. But what I'm trying to square is, if it comes in from one direction, it only requires 2. If it comes from a different direction or a different venue, then it requires 3. And this doesn't necessarily address that. I'm trying to make a point.
Just to make
obviously.
something clear, we do have things that come from committees. They're not subcommittees, they're real committees. So we have committees and ad hoc committees. But when things come from committee, it either comes with a recommendation or without. If we have 2 committee members who don't agree, it doesn't come with a recommendation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. To reiterate my point, but from a subcommittee, it only requires 2 council members to ultimately agree for that to progress as a recommendation to the council, whereas if it's born out of the council meeting, it requires 3 to then proceed.
The point is, the 2 council members have given it a lot of study and a lot of thought, and usually there's a reason it was taken to the committee. I think that's different than somebody reading in a newspaper that some other city someplace, not necessarily in our county, but someplace did something, and bringing it in and out of the blue saying, gee, I read they did this in South Pasadena, so I think we ought to do it, and everybody saying, gee, that sounds good, and then staff spending a lot of time in bringing it back. And this happened last year, just about a year ago, and then having people say, oh, gee, we didn't realize it was so much work, and now that we see it, we don't want it, and every single one of us voted against it. I think that's the kind of thing we're looking at preventing, with just I read this, and people saying, yeah, that sounds good.
I don't want to monopolize time, so I'll let everyone else have their questions before we proceed to comment.
Susan?
I wanted to piggyback off what Sean is talking about because, and I realize that this is not talking about committees, but under this model, let's just take the policy committee. Every policy they revise, does that need to get an approval from the majority of the council before staff and council spend time on that? I mean, is that, do we have to decide as a council down to the nitty-gritty of which policy we're going to work on this month? Or are we going to allow 2 of our council members who have been appointed to a committee, are we going to count on them to be thoughtful and make some reasonable decisions? And then, of course, before the policy is approved, it has to come to us. Charlotte, you mentioned last year, so I'm not sure exactly which
It was
item.
an ordinance that we were looking at. I can't remember which.
I know,
But George did a lot of work on an ordinance.
Yeah, that was,
I can't remember what it was on.
yeah, that was what I brought up, and it was talking about the third-party delivery. Because my question behind this, there was a question, was has this really been an issue that we are contending with? Because I haven't seen that in the time that I've been here. And so my question is always, why are we fixing something if it isn't broken? And although, well, I'll save the rest of what I'm going to say to comments. But other than that one issue or that one instance, has this been, have we been asking the staff to do a whole bunch of work on stuff that we end up, just like, no, we don't like that after all? I don't recall that.
Tony?
I have comments, I don't have.
No questions. Okay. Let me ask, is there any member of the public who'd like to speak to us on this issue? Seeing no one come forward, we'll go ahead with comments. Mr.
I think Susan was first.
Oh. Tony?
Okay. So this discussion came about with, I think, in good faith intent, because it was brought to us by staff, who indicated that they were trying to avoid spending an inordinate amount of time on something when ultimately it wasn't going to, be adopted or be approved. And I can understand that in other words, the intent was that it would lessen the burden on staff. It would avoid a full workup unless at least 3 members were in alignment. And I think that has merit. I think we can go back and forth about whether that streamlines the process or not. What Sean said, though, is something that I want to think about, because I think I'm going to frame it differently, Sean, than what you said. I think what you're trying to say, no, I think what I hear you saying is, what I hear you saying is, if you want to get something through, you're going to wait and do it in committee, and you're not going to do it in front of the full council. In other words, take your shot at doing it through committee as opposed to doing it through the full council. And it's hard to reconcile those two from a logic standpoint. I think that's what I'm hearing you say. And if I'm right, if I'm hearing you correctly, I get that. I understand that. I'm not sure that we have any, okay, now I got to ask a question, sorry. I don't think we have any specific policy on committee discussions or committee things. So it seems to me that we ought to bounce this back to policy committee again and have more of a discussion to see if we can try to reconcile the point that you brought up, John. Susan, I want to make sure that I'm responsive to what you said. And I think what I heard you say was, for every policy revised, does that need to be approved by a majority of the council? In other words, I think your issue was, well, gosh, policy committee over the course of a year is going to hear a bunch of policies. In that case, though, staff has brought it to the council, or brought it to the policy committee and said, we think these particular policies need to be changed, for example, procurement, et cetera. So the baseline for that is somewhat different, I think, than a council member initiated issue, for the most part. I mean, I guess. So anyway, that would be how I would respond. My answer to the question you posed would be no, I don't think so. Because you,
I was using
okay.
that as an example of
Fair.
other things that come up in committee.
Yeah, no, fair.
And let me
fair-
just say, I think this policy, considering the discussion and considering the way it's been changed, is not named correctly. This isn't just for scheduling city council meeting agenda items. That implies it's the way every agenda item would be scheduled. This is restricted to city council member requests for scheduling agenda items at city council meetings.
Right, and so I was just going to say, but notwithstanding, fair point, and it seems to me that what we ought to do is have another, I'm not aware that we're in any burning hurry on this one. I mean, I know we have new issues that come up all the time, but my thought would be we send it back to policy committee and have another discussion on this in light of the remarks by Sean and Susan, and see where we go.
Yes, Sean?
Just, yeah, quick comments. I think the intent, I understand the intent. I don't dismiss that one bit. We don't want staff going on a fool's errand, wasting their time, chasing, doing a whole bunch of research on something that won't curry favor with the council in the end. Totally understand. I'm in agreement with that. The idea of having a threshold of 3 merely in order to want to discuss an item and get down further into the weeds for consideration, for me, it's one too many. I don't see a significant issue, that this is something that Susan had referenced, but I don't see a significant issue where that this is necessarily solving. I understand there's one specific thing that we can point to in recent memory in the last year where this is applicable. Aside from that, I personally can't think of one right now. Another one that it would apply to. What I would suggest is, and somehow maybe this could be worked as a policy, but I agree that, well, I like the idea of two members have to agree if we want to bring it back and discuss it. I'm sensitive to staff's time and the burden of just everything else that you guys and gals have. So I would suggest that the council members suggesting it more bear the burden of doing the research and putting something forward, whether that's a presentation or some other, we find a way to unburden the staff. If a council member is particularly sensitive, obviously we need staff support to help us educate about the nitty-gritty of maybe how it might relate to the state or how it works internally within the city and whatnot. Certainly it will require staff resources. Everything does. With the makeup of, how our city and our council is made up. But if we can find a way to not have something become an overly burdensome issue where staff time is just, your guys' time is ravaged and consumed by something that is just a kind of going to end up being a misfire.
Let me ask this. Would you be opposed to still having a two-step process where it would be brought back, the council member or the two council members would prepare something, it would be discussed further and not just oh, gee, that sounds really good right now, but everybody'd have 2 more weeks or 4 more weeks, whatever, to think about it. And then after that, direct staff to bring us an ordinance or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't think council members would be the appropriate people to write an ordinance or whatever it is we want.
Yeah, I mean, aside from something that is incredibly urgent, in which case staff would probably be bringing that to us anyway, but aside from some real urgent matter, I don't see any issue with, and obviously the Brown Act doesn't allow us to have a full-on discussion about a non-agendized item anyway, so if I were to suggest something for a future meeting, yeah, at that future meeting, I would expect to get more further into the weeds and have a much more significant conversation about that specific item. An action doesn't need to be required. We don't need to go, from just mere suggestion of an idea to action within 2 weeks. I think we can have a 3-step process where we have a suggestion of an action, a more in-depth conversation with a recommendation at a future meeting after we've had a more thorough conversation to an agendized action item to follow.
Right.
I'm not opposed to that. And my other concern is I don't want to kill genuinely good ideas, because sometimes it takes some discussion, it takes some digging through the weeds for it to dawn on you that, oh, this is legitimate. We can make a suggestion at a council meeting and just bring it up nonchalant. And I'd have to expect that 2 of you are kind of in line with my thinking and know enough about that particular issue or topic for you to make a well-informed enough decision on as to whether or not we should even discuss it. And for me, I think there's a potential where we miss opportunities as a result, so, by having too high of a threshold.
Well, right now it's one other.
Right.
You have to have 2.
Correct.
If you can't find one other person to agree with you,
Well, then you got a problem. Yeah.
then you got a
Yeah.
problem. But you notice this isn't that old a policy. Well, it is, but we used to have it so that any one council member could have anything agendized. And it did get at that point to where we were discussing a lot of things that nobody else had any interest in passing, much less 2 other people. So I think the idea for having another council member agree with you is a good one initially. Susan?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Mr. Mulchay said. I am sensitive, too, to staff time, and I certainly don't want to force any of us to spend time and effort on valuable resources on things that aren't going to pan out. But I think we also have to be really careful about going too far the other way. And, you know, as Sean said, there are good ideas that I don't want us to miss out on. I think there are, I'm trying not to say the word, but I'm going to, minority positions or minority ideas. And I think it's important that we're able to have those discussions. I see us as a deliberative body. I try very hard not to come here with my mind made up. And so if we're asking the council to decide not to even discuss something that, you know, we legally can't discuss it anywhere else, and our only option is to have that group discussion here on the dais, I think that we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we're not going to allow those other ideas be deliberated. So I think we have to be really careful about crafting this policy so that we find that balance. I don't want good ideas not to be heard. I don't want questionable ideas not to have a chance to be deliberated and to get community input. And I think that's really important. So it feels to me that having to have a majority at every step it's a little worrisome for me. It seems too easy to never, ever, ever have to think outside the box, outside of your box, and hear a really good, vibrant, and vigorous debate on some of the things we have to decide. So I would like to see this go back. I would like, I actually like the idea of a step process, but with only requiring 2 council members in support for that first step. Maybe that's a possibility. But I'm really struggling with not being able to hear good ideas.
Kevin, did you have comments?
Yeah, I think that we've had a thorough discussion here, but I think if we do bring it back to the committee, I keep hearing about staff time, and maybe we can develop exactly what we're talking about here with staff time. Is it time? Is it monetary? Is it money? Is it the lack of staff to do it? Is it the complexity of the issue? I just need to get a little bit more clarity about what constitutes staff time. And I know that's a little bit, I don't mean to put the burden on the committee here, but obviously some issues are going to take more staff time than others, and I understand that. I'm not interested in muzzling anybody's ideas up here. You're absolutely right that this is a time and a place for us to discuss things. In my years, several council members have brought up ideas to be agendized, and I've seen nods by the majority of the council members. That doesn't mean that just one council member's been in favor of agendizing this. They just never got a roll call vote. To me, if it's a good idea, I think the majority of the council will support that. It's all predicated on whether or not it's a good idea or not. I'll give another example. I believe, Mr. Mulchay, when we were talking about, and it's been a while, refresh my memory, about a diesel generator. And I believe Mr. Mulchay said, hey, why don't we talk about, a generator that perhaps could be, non-diesel. And, we went and we moved that past, but that's a good idea. And to me, good ideas will always prevail over bad ideas. And to get that third vote, if it's a good idea, I don't think is going to be that much more challenging than what it is now. But given some direction to the committee, I know your job, and with the committee, which is 2, obviously we can't get 3 because we have 2 members here, but it still has to go back to the full council for a thorough discussion. And I think with those modifications, the committee could look at maybe defining more about what the definition of staff time is would be somewhat more helpful to me.
Madam Mayor, may I make a comment?
Certainly.
And during my presentation, I did mention that a priority for staff is, and you know, what we'd like council to consider is that we do have a work plan that we shared with the city council, the goals and objectives. So there are many items that are coming before staff members from the goals and objectives. And of course, then we have our day-to-day operations. And so when we request the city council to consider the revisions, we do so also with knowing that we have to juggle these and balance this workload. So when we talk about, staff time, we're talking about prioritization. And when requests are being made by the city council, ensuring that these requests, are prioritized, right? City council is expecting a return on those requests, which means that we're pushing off other items because we do have a full plate. So, time doesn't just, obviously isn't it monetary, isn't, more resources. It also means prioritization of the council's goals and objectives and those projects that we're working forth. So I just want to keep that in mind, like the city council, when if we do come back, and this item comes back, is that it's also about balancing that workload and knowing that some items may be fallen off or be delayed because we're taking in items at these meetings for future agenda items.
Or perhaps delaying the council requests. They don't always have to come back at the next meeting, and staff doesn't always have to work for 2 weeks and get the full ordinance or whatever onto the very next agenda. We can wait. We ask for something. I don't think any of us, unless there's some kind of an emergency indicated, expects it to be right away. I think we expect some time. So, Tony, you started out with comments. Did you have more comments? I saw you writing. Yes.
I also wanted to just, since it was the example, I changed my position on that completely with the third-party delivery service. I wouldn't have been able to make that change of decision without the report that we got. And so I don't see that as wasted time. I saw that as time where we got a really, is George here? There he is. A really, really good report. And I felt, even though I changed my mind and wasn't my original intent, that time was well spent for all of us learning something that was, happening, that we're worried about our companies and the pandemic and all of that. So I would, again, just be really careful that a good idea is more than just a good or versus bad idea. It's do we even have enough information to make an educated and wise decision? So,
Well, I think I hear that it will be going back to committee. I think I heard 3 people say that. So there's no further discussion needed on this tonight. The next item is item B, Transit Operations and Maintenance Services Agreement Amendment. Could we have the staff report, please?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Can I ask the city attorney, does the trolley have any discussion on this?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure Tyler does.
Can you speak right in where, oh, wait a minute. Okay, now let's try it.
This item includes the total price for revenue hours, which does technically include the rate for the trolley.
Am I at liberty to proceed with this?
No, you and Charlotte will not be able to participate in this item.
Okay, I have to recuse myself from this discussion because my husband and I own property that is within 500 feet of a trolley stop, and so I will pass the gavel over to the vice mayor.
And I'll have to recuse myself because I have a business that is within 500 feet of a trolley stop.
All right.
Yeah.
Proceed, Tyler.
Thank you. So this is the RATP agreement amendment. Agreement 2020-31 was for transit operations and maintenance services between the city and RATP. It was a 3-year agreement that was effective April 1st, 2020. So we're currently in year 2 of the 3-year agreement. It was advertised and bids were received during pre-pandemic conditions late 2019 and early 2020. The only method for billable revenue in that original agreement across all services is by vehicle revenue hour. COVID-19 pandemic had significant impacts on the ridership and billable revenue hours, or billable vehicle revenue hours. And that's somewhat unique to our type of service. Because our transit services are primarily dial-a-ride, the impact to demand is significant to the contractor as far as billable revenue hours go. Because we don't have as many fixed route and fixed costs, the billable revenue hours are significantly impacted by COVID-19. Because of that, Council approved temporary agreement amendments 2020-31A, B, and C. Those temporary agreement amendments allowed for an additional method of payment based on their actual expenses. And it really offered the city an inside look to their books and was a very transparent way for the contractor to report their costs and allowed the city to help keep them from being underwater on a month-to-month basis. Each amendment has since expired, and as of April 1st, 2021, there's no additional method of payment. However, the long-term impacts of COVID-19 are still impacting the billable vehicle revenue hours, and the proposed amendment 2020-31D is a long-term solution. So in agreement 2020-31D, it proposes a variable tiered vehicle revenue hour rate. And what that means is that there are different tiers and rates for which they will be paid on, but those tiers are based on the average monthly vehicle revenue hours from the years 2018 and 2019. So we looked at each month because each month has an ebb and flow of how much ridership or demand there is. So we averaged each month, and then the tiered rate is based on that per month revenue hours. So the first tier is 80% to 100% of those billable revenue hours when compared to the average for 2018 and 2019. And you have the year 2 rate and the year 3 rate. And both of those in tier 1 are the original agreement price. So there would be no change to the structure of how RATP is paid, so long as the vehicle revenue hours are above 80% and similar to pre-pandemic conditions. However, as the vehicle revenue hours decrease, the rate increases. That does not mean, however, that we are paying RATP more money. Because the vehicle revenue hours are decreased, even though the rate's higher, the total amount paid on an annual basis for each tier would be less than the original contract rate. It gives us an opportunity for annual savings, as well as no risk of increased cost. It's a long-term solution that helps prevent the need to come back with temporary agreements over and over again due to the unpredictability of how long COVID impacts will last. So this method allows us to return to normal billing processes without doing the expense report method anymore, which the expense report method was their actual cost. There was no profit for them and no risk of loss, but this now reintroduces that because as vehicle revenue hours fluctuate, and again, it's unpredictable how long these COVID-19 impacts will last for transit specifically. This gives us a solution for year 2 and year 3. It allows RATP the opportunity for profit. So the midpoint of tiers 2 through 5, even at the increased rate, because we've seen their books, is roughly their break-even point. If they're at the high end of one of the tiers, there's an opportunity for profit, and if they're at the low end, there's also an opportunity that they don't meet that break-even point. However, the profit margins in each tier are less than 1% of the total contract price and are lower than the original agreement that was proposed. In addition to the tiered rate, RATP has offered a few extra opportunities for reduced annual costs. If the city permanently reduces the fleet vehicles, RATP would reduce the price across all tiers, including Tier 1, including that normal contract rate, by 84 cents. And the 84 cents is actually a typo. It should be 87 cents. This essentially passes through the reduced cost of vehicle maintenance and insurance directly. So as we reduce the fleet size, of course, staff continuously monitors the fleet needs, but again, fleet demand is unpredictable with the unpredictable demand of service. If the city approves any service modifications that permanently reduces the number of RATP staff required to operate the service, RATP in good faith will negotiate a lower rate as well. So, for example, if we removed a fixed route and permanently removed a staff person and a driver, RATP in their proposal offered to permanently reduce the rate across all tiers again, including that Tier 1. With that, the suggested action is to authorize the city manager to execute agreement number 2020-31D with RATP, restructuring the payment method to account for variable demand for CAT services. And I'm available for any questions.
Are there any questions? Mr. Tremblay.
Thank you. Could we go back to the slide that had the matrix and prices? There you go. Thanks. So I had two specific questions, Tyler. The first one, and it's on the top of page 2 of the staff report. It's big page 3 at the very top, and I quote, "The proposed payment structure only increases the vehicle revenue hour rate if the billable revenue hours are less than 80% of normal conditions for any given month." And I see that in the Tier 1 rate. My question is, 80% of normal conditions for any given month. Did you, if I'm understanding you correctly, Tyler, that normal conditions is premised upon what the ridership was for 2018 and 2019?
Correct. The average of 2018 and 2019 revenue hours.
Is there any basis for believing, though, given how slowly ridership is returning across all transit forms, including bus and rail, et cetera, is there any, I guess it sounds more like devil's advocate, but are we convinced that that's the appropriate, that 80% is the total, is the appropriate baseline condition to utilize? In other words, why 80%?
The 80% is based on the original agreement having a provision that we would, in good faith, negotiate under 80%. So because the services have fallen under 80% on a regular basis, the original agreement said that's when we would make adjustments to the rate. And again, the original bid process assumes that that's a regular business model, that it includes high months and low months. And as we showed before in the table with the average monthly revenue hours, they can vary, from 2,500 a month to 3,200 a month pretty regularly.
Right. Let me approach it. Let me reframe it. Is there an expectation looking forward that we will return to 80% of normal conditions within a period of time? In other words, have staff done any forecasting relative to that?
Based on the past few months of ridership increases, the trend suggests that we will.
will return to
Above 80%.
to above 80%. In what period of time?
The-
Which I'm, sorry, I know that calls, that says, hey, Tyler, would you please trot out your crystal ball? But notwithstanding that, I want to hear what staff has looked at.
It's even more difficult to answer that question with the recent increase in fares, to really see what the impact of that is on ridership, if that reduces ridership or not. So it's very difficult to give you a specific answer as to when within that region.
Okay,
You know, within 2 years, I would say it is likely.
okay. Can I keep going? Same page on the staff report, 2 paragraphs down. And this is the portion of the staff report that talks about where there are transit vehicles being taken out of service permanently. In fact, I think it's in the next slide, or maybe it's in the second succeeding slide. That 87-cent figure, how was that? I guess it's not 84 cents, it's
It's
87
cents,
cents.
correct.
How was that 87-cent figure chosen?
That is based on the insurance cost annually for that vehicle, as well as the average maintenance and parts.
Does that average insurance cost plus, I'll just say O&M for that, does that fairly represent the entire cost from a O&M standpoint of keeping that vehicle in service?
It is pretty much a one-to-one, yes.
Well, let me try it a different way. What other components, if any, are there in addition to the insurance and the average O&M cost for that vehicle? Are there any other components? In other words, I'm trying to, go ahead,
It
sorry.
depends on what you bulk in with O&M. Saying O&M could be a catch-all for everything.
That's kind of where I'm going with this.
So-
I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
the O&M, because it kind of covers a big waterfront.
Yes, and it truly does it's more the maintenance side, not the operation side. So it is, the 87 cents is derived from the insurance cost, as well as the a percentage of maintenance labor, a percentage of parts, oil, filters, the regular maintenance, not extra maintenance, so not transmission replacements or specialty, but tires, it would include that. It would not include cleaning of the vehicles. It would not include driver labor, just maintenance labor. So it's the reduction of fleet, that 87 cents is calculated based on general maintenance and insurance reduction.
So that, by inference, then, it really kind of excludes operation labor.
Correct. But given the nature of the demand response, we're not paying for operation costs unless the vehicle's on the road. So inherently, by
Right.
reducing the fleet, we would already reduce that on its own.
Okay, so that to me hangs together logically. So then 87 cents would be the appropriate, let me back up. Those would be the appropriate components to consider in arriving at that price. Okay. One other, sorry, can you go back again 2 slides? And I'm going to go back up to the top of page 3 of the staff report. In the first paragraph, the second sentence, and this is the hypothetical where the billable revenue hours are less than 80% of normal conditions for any given month, and we've talked about that. The next sentence then states the rate then increases for each 10% decrease in vehicle revenue hours, or VRH, to address the limited scalability and the fixed cost of RATP's operations. And that's what the matrix on the right-hand side indicates. So for example, if you go to a 75% figure, the proposed VRH rate would go to $91.08. You go further down, and it keeps on going. So
Correct.
if you go down to in the 60% range, then you're at $103.69.
Correct.
That's what this means.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I got just a short few questions. Tyler, do we have the numbers for June already?
I don't have them with me, but we do have them.
We have them. Do you know roughly where we fall on that matrix just for June? I'm
We're
kinda- I
in
want-
the high 60s, I believe. But I would have to double check.
Okay. I just want to understand where we are at this moment right now. So with the anticipation that it's going to slowly, in some way, trend upward, hopefully.
Yes, a safer answer would be probably 70 plus or minus.
Okay. Thank you. The 87 cents, do we still have 19 vehicles in our fleet?
Yes.
Okay. And the 87 cents, it's not dependent upon which vehicle we take out of service, because we have different size vehicles.
Correct.
Okay. Is that, I don't think we bought any vehicles last year to
Correct.
replace aging
Correct.
vehicles. So, and I don't know what staff's anticipation, I'm not sure what the age is and the mileage is on those vehicles, but if this takes, in fact, 2 years, I think that's what you said, right? Sid, we anticipate maybe getting back to 100% within a 2-year span?
Yep.
Yeah, I won't peg you on it if it doesn't, yeah. Would it make sense then for staff to start looking at whether or not we want to take out vehicles?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're continuing to monitor that and adjust that. Our fleet is aging, and even though we may need to purchase vehicles soon, when that option's available to us, the number of vehicles that we could remove from service when we purchase vehicles could be more than what we purchase.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Sure, are you good? Good? Okay, I do want to take, if there is any public comment, I know we have people here in the audience, so I want to be respectful of them if anyone wants to speak on this topic, otherwise we can go to deliberation. I don't see anyone rushing up, so. All right. Discussion?
I'll move the suggested action.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Please vote. All right, I see 3 in favor with 2 abstaining. Motion passes. And with that, someone might want to go get our 2 colleagues.
Okay, it is 6:07. We have another discussion item. Ordinance amending Camarillo Municipal Code by adding Chapter 9.10, regulating the use of expanded polystyrene. Would it be better if we took this up or go back into closed session? I'm asking the city manager.
I think taking it up would
Okay.
be appropriate.
Introduction of an ordinance. Could we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, council members, Mayor Craven. George Winkler here, Economic Development Coordinator for the public who's not aware of my title. So tonight we'll be following up on our May 12th City Council item regarding an expanded polystyrene ban. An expanded polystyrene, for those tuning into this topic for the first time, is a foam material that is known by the trademark name of styrofoam and is commonly used to produce food packaging materials like cups and to-go containers. And as alternative products become available to the public, municipalities have been banning food packaging products made with EPS because of its negative health and environmental impacts. So based on council's direction at the May 12th City Council meeting, staff has prepared an ordinance for your consideration that would amend the Camarillo Municipal Code by adding Chapter 9.10, regulating the use of expanded polystyrene. And that would prohibit food providers from providing prepared food in or providing separately any expanded polystyrene container. The ordinance defines the types of disposable food containers and food providers that would be impacted beginning on January 1st, 2022, when the ordinance would go into effect. Additionally, the ordinance includes an exemption procedure should there be an undue hardship or practical difficulty for a business, and includes information on penalties and enforcement should a food provider not comply with the ordinance. Should council introduce and adopt this ordinance, we'll take a business-friendly approach to this ban and inform the public through various methods. We'll create a landing page on the city's website, create informational graphics, social media posts, and we'll send communications directly to the affected food providers. We'll also work directly with E.J. Harrison and include this information in the biannual Trash Flash newsletter that goes out directly to commercial customers. As mentioned earlier, the ordinance includes a financial hardship exemption procedure, which will be included with the communications. To be eligible for the financial hardship exemption, that extends for one time the effective date for an eligible application for 1 year. A food provider will be required to submit an application that includes a list of the EPS products they are using, explain why a non-compliant product is being requested, and explain why a compliant product is not available or affordable. So this application will go to the city's senior management in charge of our waste disposal agreements. And other cities that have included this hardship exemption in their EPS bans have had little or no requests for these exemptions. So we're not anticipating a high volume of requests. It's worth noting that it was requested to bring back rigid polystyrene or single-use plastics. We'll be doing that at a later date. So this ban is just for that styrofoam product. So if your council would like to move forward and introduce the ordinance, staff suggests that council requests a reading of the title of ordinance number 1181 and waives further reading of and introduces the ordinance. So that concludes staff's report, and if you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Oh, I can't believe this. Somebody's got to ask one question. Kevin, you always ask questions.
All right, I'll ask a question. Talk me into it, I'll ask a question. Let's just say if there's a hardship, George, and let's just say there's a restaurant out there that's got a 2-year supply of, these products. Is there a way that they can get another extension other than the 1 year on this so they can, use all of the total supply of the takeouts that they've got in their inventory?
This ordinance only has a 1-year extension. So one time that would make all businesses compliant by 2023.
Okay, so, but realistically, within 1 year, they ought to be able to go through most, if not all. I mean, in your research, has that been predicated for the most part on that?
Yeah, I have a 10-year experience in the food service industry, and it's pretty unlikely that a restaurant would have a 2 years supply of styrofoam in their back, really small storage area.
Okay. That's all.
Mr. Tremblay.
But George, the way the ordinance is drafted, it would not take effect until January 1 of 2022. So hypothetically, I guess a business could have 18 months worth, right? So I think we're,
That's a long time.
yeah, that was really more of an editorial comment than a question. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak to us on this item? Please come forward. If people would like to speak to us on an item, there are blue cards in the back, and so don't do it now. We'd like to hear your comments, but you can fill it out and put it in the box right there after you speak, okay? Please state your name, and the microphone's on. You have 3 minutes. Let me just explain. I see a clock out there, and you see a clock up here. It will count down. When it gets to 1 minute remaining, there'll be a tone, a buzzer, and then there'll be a yellow light, and you can finish up in that 1 minute. I do call everybody at the end of 3 minutes sharp because it's not really fair to let some people go on and to cut other people off. So please start.
Yeah, my name is Eric Bershinger, spelled E-R-I-C-B-U-R-S-C-H-I-N-G-E-R. I'm a lifelong member, or lifelong resident here in Camarillo. I graduated from ACHS in 2019, and I'm now studying environmental science in college. I also lead a group of passionate young people who want to make Camarillo more ecologically friendly, called Sustainable Camarillo Initiative. And I'm asking you to please support the ban on extended polystyrene. I have been to many local beaches and waterways in Ventura County examining the impacts of plastic pollution, and I can tell you styrofoam is one of the most common finds. Its unique properties makes it especially harmful to the natural environment and local ecosystems. It's lightweight, so it can be easily caught by the wind and carried from landfills or trash cans into drainage systems, where it makes its way into the ocean. Styrofoam also breaks down especially easily into microplastics. Microplastics are impossible to clean up and will stay within food chains for literally thousands of years. Toxic microplastics are often mistaken as food or simply picked up by animals, especially sea life, where it is incredibly damaging to the organism. Populations of seabirds are down 70% since 1950, and the bioaccumulation of microplastics is a major reason why. Also, I'm a big fish eater. I'm actually pescatarian, so fish is the only meat that I eat. And fish are delicious, but what isn't delicious is the 30% of fish that contain microplastics, which means that the plastics we throw out are coming back around and making their way into humans and our food chain. For these reasons, I ask you to take the necessary action today to help protect our coastal ecosystems and local wildlife. And I also ask you to take further steps to promote the use of biodegradable containers and also ban other types of harmful single-use plastics down the road, possibly through a citywide climate action / sustainability plan, such as the ones that other nearby cities such as Oxnard or Thousand Oaks already have in place. It really means a lot to me for all of you to be taking up this issue and voting on it. And especially thank you to Councilmember Tremblay for originally proposing this, and Councilmember Santangelo for seconding the motion. And I really do appreciate it, and I thank you all for caring about our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to us on this subject? Seeing no one else come forward, I will turn it back to the council. Is there any further discussion? If not, I will ask request a reading of the title.
This is an ordinance of the City Council, well, first of all, it's ordinance 1181, and it's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, adding Chapter 9.10, regulating the use of expanded polystyrene to the Camarillo Municipal Code.
Mr. Tremblay?
Madam Mayor, I move that we waive further reading and introduce ordinance number 1181, amending the Camarillo Municipal Code to add Chapter 9.10, regulating the use of expanded polystyrene.
I'll second the motion.
A motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we will now recess again to closed session. And at the end of our public hearing this evening, we will then go back to new business, oral communication, information items. So the city attorney has already read the conditions under which we are meeting in closed session, and so we will now be in recess. We'll be back for business at 7 o'clock. Call the meeting back to order. Ask the record to reflect that all council members are present. And this is the time for public comments on items that are not on the agenda. If you're here for the public hearing, that will be the next item. I will call the names in the order I've received the cards. And let me explain our public comments rules. Each speaker has 3 minutes. I will hold you to the 3 minutes. There's a clock that I can see, and there's a clock up here that you can see. The clock will count down. When it gets to 1 minute remaining, a tone will sound, and there will be a yellow light, and then you have 1 minute to complete your comments. The first card I have is from Richard Figueroa Barajas. Okay. I can call her first. The first card I have is from Elizabeth Artuso.
Is this thing on?
We hear you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Betsy Artuso, and I'm commenting on the Camarillo Area Transit bus pass, monthly bus pass price increase. And I had serious problems with the fact that as of July 1st, the ADA and senior bus passes, monthly bus pass, was $25 and is now, we're required to pay $80. And that's a 220% price increase. For the general public, we're paying $55 and now required to pay $120. That's a 140% price increase. Also, folks who are between the ages of 55 to 65, since we've increased the age or raised the age of a senior to 65, those individuals were paying $25 and now required to pay $120 for a monthly bus pass. And that is a 380% price increase. I am aware that back in March 2020, the City Council received 2 bids from 2 vendors to operate our Camarillo Area Transit. And there was the RATP, those are the folks that bought the old Roadrunner, and there was also West Coast Paratransit, WCTPT, excuse me. And there were a few, I would say 3 different variables that factored in that the RATP folks rated better than the WCTP. That was the fact that they were familiar to our city council and to our city, and also that they were more well-versed in the Title VI, which is the ADA and the discrimination cases that may come along with that, and the laws with regard to discrimination. And also, there was a time crunch. We needed to the city needed to sign a contract. So I discovered that the city did approve or did award a 3-year contract to the RATP, the folks that purchased the Roadrunner. And the price difference between the two was over $650,000 that the city was going to be paying this RATP for this 3-year contract. So, with that said, I just can't resist connecting the dots between that remarkable price increase, which the members did remark upon, and the fact that we have these huge percentages in our increased monthly bus pass. I think the fact that that our price increases is so great, and the increase in cost is being passed along to the population of Camarillo that is least likely able to afford these costs and to absorb these costs. So I think we can do better. I think the city of Camarillo can do better. These price increases are not normal and not and wrong, I should say. So I'm asking that the city council return to the price increases, because I know they have to happen, but not to that extent. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Richard Figueroa Barajas.
Good afternoon or good evening, council. I would definitely recommend everybody continue wearing masks. My 24-year-old son, who was already vaccinated, has contracted the COVID Delta variant. And anyway, this is the second time he's contracted COVID. Anyway, with that, to attach to what Ms. Ortuzzo said, I am a writer as well. This is the third time that you've seen me speak up here or heard me speak. And, you know, I showed my monthly pass card. Well, I can't afford it anymore. So now I have to do the per ticket ride. And you all have noticed my service dog here. One of the reasons why I use Cat, obviously because I can't drive, but the park, the dog park that's up, Fieldcrest Dog Park up on Mission Oaks, that was our daily outing. For 2 hours, he could be a real dog instead of a service dog, and that is my personal time to get the exercise that I can. Excuse me. I am only allowed to go out at certain times of the day because I'm very light sensitive. Excuse the hat, but I explained that the first time I spoke. And so I would always go in the evening time. Well, now I cannot. He cannot go off leash, and I am subject to just walking on the sidewalks, which aren't as even, as you know. We have very challenged sidewalks here in Camarillo. And again, it's such a challenge for me mentally. I'm not only physically disabled, but I'm also mentally disabled with PTSD. And one of the things that I am prescribed by the doctors is to get out. So here's my retirement military ID. Here's my ADA ID. You know, we're real people, and we served the city, the state, and the country well. And we're just asking for a fair look into this and to put it on the docket, because as much as everybody says this was advertised prior to the decision making, it was not. Myself and Betsy were two avid riders who never saw any advertisements whatsoever. I spoke to all the drivers, the 8 drivers that drive me, and only 2 of them said that they remember seeing something about the advertisement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker, I believe, is Alu. You just pull that microphone all the way down, and then we'll be able to hear you. Say hello so we can see if we can hear you now.
Hello.
Okay, can you pull it down just a little bit more? There you go, thanks. Okay.
Hello, council members. I'm Aloysia. The masks are causing death, and the kids in school have to wear one for hours. Does anyone like them? Because I don't. Earlier this month, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, a study was published that showed a carbon dioxide 3 times higher than safe levels due to masks. The masks are stupid. We should be normal, they say. But brothers and sisters, I hope you think different. Thanks for your time. Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate your coming and telling us. I hope you'll go to the school board and tell them, because they're the ones who run the schools. Thank you very much. Timothy McGarry.
Good evening, council members, mayor. My name is Timothy McGarry. I don't identify this way, but for the ease of conversation, I am a homeless father of 5. I've lived here in Camarillo since I was about 14. And recently, in the small community of homeless that we have occupying off of Poncho Road, down in the industrials where we can park our oversized vehicles, we've had a rash of very ugly issues with our local police department. I've actually been in conversation with Commander Tennyson, who's here tonight, as well as Captain Matthews, and I have witnessed people's homes being towed in clear violation of Martin v. Boise. I have received threats from deputies that if only we could enforce the anti-camping statutes. I'm not doing this for recreation. This is my life. I'm not harming anyone, and our community is constantly under threat there. We've witnessed bulldozers taking people's property away with notice given the day that the bulldozers showed up. And I've tried to speak with Commander Tennyson, and he put me in touch with Ms. Caruth with the county over a parking lot idea that no compensation's being looked for. Both Tennyson and Ms. Caruth have expressed that they love the idea. They think it's wonderful. And yet there's been no movement in over a month on that. I haven't been contacted. Nobody's, asked for any details. So by action, it doesn't seem like this is a solution that wants to be taken care of by this city. And it's a very sad situation when people have to fear their city officials, fear their local police department, instead of being able to have dialogue and being able to come together as humans to find viable solutions to protect the most vulnerable in our community. I really hope that, we can have communication on this. I'm going to attempt to email Mr. Mulcahy. I'm sorry, it's a pronunciation, but as I believe you're District 5, and that's where the community that I'm in touch with and working with of over 20 individuals living out there and 2 families, including mine. So I hope we can come to some good, compassionate resolutions on this. Thank you very much for your time.
That's all the cards I have. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to us on an item that is not on the agenda? Please come up. You can just put your card in the box there and...
Thank you. Hi, I'm Spencer Ritchie, and I am somebody who now has to think twice about using the dial-a-rides because of the fare jump for dial-a-rides from $1.50 per ride to $2 per ride. And I've actually been doing research in the city's 2021 budget about, you know, the costs of everything and the cost of the public transit and stuff. And in addition to my concerns shared with Betsy about the city approving RATP, mostly like in what we think is a move of like familiarity instead of, I don't know, going with the option that cost more than $600 less over the 3-year period. And and just simply hiring a like somebody to work out the Title VI quirks so that what West Coast Paratransit was in compliance with that. I was also looking at the city's 2021 budget, and as well as the March 13th, as well as the March 11th, 2020 meeting in which they decided to go with RATP instead of West Coast Paratransit. And two things struck out to me. One is that the city budget for transit, that's a bit over $2 million. The money from fares, passes, etc., that is only $150,000. Even with the, on average, 220% jump in fare passes and dollar ride, that would still only bring it to about, I don't know, $400,000 out of a roughly $2.1, $2.2, $2.3 million budget. And the other thing, too, is that I've noticed that the city's landscaping, that gets over $3 million, according to the 2021 budget. And the city is planting over 250 trees. How many of those, where are the trees being planted, and how many are replacements for trees that you decided got too big? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to us on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we'll go to our public hearing. The fiscal year 2021 Action Plan Second Amendment for CDBG-CV3 funding. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Craven, members of the City Council. Oksana Buck will be presenting this item.
Good evening, Mayor Craven and council members. This item is on the Second Amendment to the fiscal year 2020-2021 Action Plan, which will incorporate the supplemental CDBG funding that was made available by the CARES Act. The city receives an annual CDBG formula grant from HUD to provide decent housing and expand economic opportunities for low and moderate income persons. In 2020, the city received supplemental CDBG grants, which were made available by the CARES Act to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. We use the acronym CDBG-CV for these funds. HUD issued the supplemental grants in 3 allocations. The first one was in the amount of $192,000. The second one was only for jurisdictions with high homeless populations, and Camarillo was not eligible. And the third allocation was in the amount of $384,000. The city must prepare annual action plans that explain how the city will spend all CDBG funds. The action plan for fiscal year 2020-2021 was adopted on May 13, 2020. It was then amended on September 23, 2020 to include the first supplemental grant of $192,000. And it must be amended again for the supplemental grant of $384,000. This slide shows a summary of the supplemental CDBG funding. The first allocation of $192,000 was included in the action plan amendment, as shown in the middle column. The city awarded those funds to St. Columba's Food Pantry, Caregivers, St. Vincent de Paul, and Lutheran Social Services. Only $2,347 was allocated for program administration so that each agency could be fully funded. Funding agreements have already been executed with these agencies, and the programs are currently underway. The new allocation of $384,000 is proposed to be included in this second action plan amendment, as shown in the last column. Staff is recommending that Catholic Charities is fully funded at $30,000. Camarillo Healthcare District is fully funded at $150,000, and PVRPD at $127,000, which is slightly below their request of $130,000. This would leave the city full 20%, or $76,000, to cover the costs of the consultant, Veronica Tam and Associates, to administer the CDBG program. The final funding allocations, as approved at this hearing, will be included in the second action plan amendment. The next steps will be to submit the amendment to HUD and execute funding agreements. The funded agencies will then carry out the activities until fall 2023. HUD requires that at least 80% of the funds are spent by November 10th, 2023, and the remaining 20% by 2026. However, the city's funding agreements will require that the agencies spend their allocations by 2023 to ensure that we meet these deadlines. And this brings us to staff recommendation, which is to adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the submittal to HUD of the fiscal year 2020-21 action plan, second amendment. And that concludes my presentation. Staff is available to answer any questions. And also, we have Eric Story from PVRPD here in the audience, who's also available.
Any questions? Okay, no questions. What are the wishes of the council? Oh, this is a public hearing, you're right. I don't know why. I asked for public comments on everything else. This is a public hearing. I don't have any cards. That's the prior speaker. Is there anyone who would like to speak to us on this item? Seeing no one come forward, I will close the public hearing. And now ask, what are the wishes of the council?
Move staff recommendation.
Motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. Brings us back to new business oral communications, information items which do not require action. City manager?
No comments at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
City attorney?
I have no comments tonight.
City council, Mr. Kildee.
Sure, I'll start it off tonight. Let's see, July 1st, we had a VRSD meeting. July 8th, I attended a VCOG meeting. And on July 4th, I was able to go to the fireworks display for the city. And I'm pleased to say it was, in my opinion, a resounding success. Slated to start at 9 o'clock, and they started at 9:01. So that's pretty good. Supposed to be 20 minutes, and they were 20 minutes. I timed them right to the second. They were 20 minutes. And other than a little bit of traffic that will be dealt with in the future, I think I want to thank the police for and our law enforcement for doing what I would consider a very good job there. From what I understand, very little, if any, problems of basically any kind. Very minimal there. I was able to talk to a few people that were there. They were very happy to have them this year. It looks like the venue worked out pretty well, especially for the first time. And very few complaints this year about it. So I was pleased. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to work there, but it looks like there's a potential at least to, go forward with some future years there. So most of the people that I had talked to really enjoyed them, and they were very well done. So with that, that's all I have tonight. So.
Mr. Tremblay.
A couple of meetings to report on since the last regular council meeting. June 25, the Metrolink, I participated in the Metrolink Board of Directors meeting. On July 8th, actually, I was out at Naval Base Ventura County together with the mayor for the change of command ceremony. And on July 9th, another Metrolink Board of Directors meeting. Two things. One, on the fireworks, I just wanted to compliment staff and compliment everyone on the job well done, your great reports. Anecdotally, I'm hearing, though, and I know that it was in our neighborhood, it seemed to me that there is a real escalation in street fireworks, or at least maybe it was a lot of pent-up demand from COVID. But a number of folks got back to me on concerns, and giving an example, in one neighborhood where a couple of homes let off a number of fireworks, and the remnants of the fireworks or the embers were falling near roofs and in yards, and it was a real cause for concern. I know that there were probably several hundred instances of that going on, and Camarillo PD simply can't be everywhere at once. There's just no way from an enforcement standpoint. But I'm hoping that for next year, we look at spending, I know we spend some time now, but trying to spend even a little more time in community education on fireworks and the dangers of setting off illegal fireworks. And then perhaps even consider looking at the penalties or fines, the citation amounts, because again, I had a number of people come to me and were very, very concerned about it. So, third thing, as part of the airport, and the airport, well, the now on hiatus airport master plan, and our prior discussions on it, you know, I think I know that we are continuing to pursue our survey, I believe, Mr. Ramirez, on that. I know we've all gotten some comments on that survey. It made me think, though, of additional ways to try to engage our community, and I wanted to just mention to the city manager perhaps another way to accomplish this is for our ad hoc committee to at least consider an appointment of an advisory committee of Camarillo residents, where you have a combination of residents, business owners, pilots at the airport, folks who are experienced in airport operations, to provide their additional perspective on what's going on. I know we're on, you know, I know we're, the matter has been paused right now, but it is going to come back at some point in the near future. So I mentioned that to Mr. Ramirez as another thing to at least think about and perhaps suggest to our ad hoc committee. And that's it for me.
Mr. Mulchay?
July 8th, had a airport authority meeting, rather uneventful one, but I'll take that as a good sign. This previous Monday, we had an ad hoc advisory committee, ad hoc airport advisory committee meeting. I do remind everyone that this coming, is it this coming? I don't have my dates right, but it's next, following Sunday, but July 25th, Sunday, July 25th, Taste of Camarillo. I think that'll probably mark the first, let's say, large event in our city since the onset of COVID. For those who obviously feel safe and comfortable and healthy, by all means, please attend. I think it's put on by the Meadowlarks every single year, except for last year. But Meadowlarks is a great organization. They do a lot of good. They contribute a lot of fundraising to local organizations and different causes. So again, where you feel safe and healthy, by all means attend. If you want to wear a mask, I encourage it. But it's good to see things, albeit slowly, get back to a little bit of sense of normalcy. So, especially when it comes to our nonprofit organizations who can fundraise and keep doing the good that they do. So, that's all I got.
Santangelo?
And the food. Don't forget the food. And the wine. For meetings attended, July 1st, CPA Board, July 8th, Airport Authority, and July 13th, that was yesterday, right? I got to tour the DeSalter. Thank you for your time, and thank Lucy. It was really cool to have toured it so long ago and to see how far we've come. So it's pretty exciting, and I was glad to be out there, even though it rained for like 7 minutes. That was weird. That's all I have.
Okay. I attended an RDP board meeting, an RDP meeting. I attended the change of command at Naval Base Ventura County and an airport ad hoc committee. This afternoon, I attended a California Contract Cities Association legislative committee, and they said that there were only a couple things really of note, but AB 215 has recently been amended, and the amendments are more onerous provisions for cities. So they highly recommended that the cities take note that one of the amendments, and I haven't read it, they didn't send this out ahead of time, but they reported that one of the amendments would compare the amount of housing production in any city with neighboring cities. And if any city is not carrying its share or conforming, then DHC could fine the cities. So I think we need to look for the new provisions, whatever they are, and react accordingly. They also ask us, the legislature will be out of session for a month, which means that they will be in their home districts for most of the month. And they suggested very strongly that we talk to our representative in the Assembly and the Senate, especially about SB 6, SB 9, and SB 519, and perhaps AB 215 as well. I'd like to remind people that Wings Over Camarillo will be August 21st and 22nd, and that is always a very nice event out at Camarillo Airport, and that the summer concerts in the park will be this year July 24th, August 7th, August 21st, and September 4th. The time is different this year, so it will be from 5 to 7 at every one of those, and there will be food trucks. Another thing that's changed is that you will not be able to place your chairs until 8 o'clock on the day of the concert, so no more Thursday afternoon as soon as city staff leaves. That's done. I'd also like to say that this morning, my grandson and I went to the FBI exhibit at the Reagan Museum, and it is excellent. It really is. I thought, we'll breeze through like we did with the Titanic and like we did with Genghis Khan, and then he'll want to go look at the Berlin Wall again, and we'll go home. Well, we went through the first time, we went and saw the Berlin Wall, and then he said, can we go through the FBI exhibit again? So I was lucky to have made it to my committee meeting at 3 o'clock today, but it's a very interesting exhibit. They also have a lot on people that the FBI looked for during my lifetime, and I found that their exhibits on each of those people was very interesting for me. Trevor and I had different things that we thought were interesting, but I read my stuff, and he read his stuff, and he wanted to go again. Anyway, that's all I had. Anybody else, second chance? That's it. So we are going back to our closed session. This is a long one tonight. We will be recessing, and I do not expect any announcement at the end. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, we're in recess.